Hello, friends and residency candidates, and welcome to today's residency success interview, where I have the pleasure of speaking with Neha, who had over 20 interviews and matched to Loma Linda Pediatrics. So I'm very excited to have you here today, Neha, so thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Can you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you to pediatrics?
Mm-hmm. So a little bit about me. I'm Neha. I was born in the US and then we moved to India when I was pretty young. And I grew up in Hyderabad in India and I did my med school in Kasturba Medical College in Karnataka. And after med school, I took a break during internship where I started preparing for my steps and went for electives and then got to apply for this match. And sorry, what was the second part? Why I got into pediatrics. So since the beginning, even before high school, I knew I wanted to work with kids. I just didn't know in what capacity. So I knew that I wanted to teach or work as a pediatrician or, just work around kids and try to help them in some sort of way. And in high school, I started shadowing my uncle who was a pediatrician. And in med school, I started taking more pediatric rotations and showing interest. And that was kind of where it all started.
Wonderful. So when you were getting ready for the application cycle, what were the things that you were hoping to achieve, or were you nervous about any aspect? What were you doing to help prepare and kind of get ready?
Mm-hmm. So I would say one thing that I would tell everyone to do is have a timeline. That is something that I struggled with in the beginning when I was planning my step 1, step 2, my rotations, and also OET and the ECFMG certification because I'm an IMG as well. So I would say that making a timeline was pretty tough and kind of trying to navigate doing what at what time is best. And I would say that I did a lot of background research and looked up what everyone else was doing, saw what my seniors did and what path they followed, and kind of tried to copy that in terms of doing what at what time.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were doing program research, you ended up with a very in-depth spreadsheet. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you were looking for when you were researching programs?
So in the beginning, I used Match a Resident to kind of get a list of all the programs that were there and also used Frida and the NRMP website as well to kind of get a list of all the programs. And then I put all of those programs into my Excel sheet and ranked them in order of if they were IMG friendly, what their locations were, because I also wanted to pick my top geographic locations as well, the geo preferences. So I kind of grouped them in terms of geographical preference, IMG friendliness, the fellowship matches, which was important to me as well because I want to pursue a fellowship in pediatrics. So I also had a separate column for how many residents are matching into fellowship programs, how many are going into Gen Peds. Then I also had another column to see if any of my seniors matched into any of these colleges. And then I also had a column for like which ones were close to family and friends because I needed that kind of support system. So I would say that these were some of the columns that I had, but it differs for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get that information regarding seniors matching into those programs?
So I got most of that from Match a Resident, and then I also used LinkedIn, and then I went to Kasturba Medical College alumni, and then I found a couple of people off of that, but mostly I would say Match a Resident, and then stalking Instagrams.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And when applications went out on September 25th, how did you feel on that day when you got everything submitted on time and applications got released? What were you going through and feeling on that day?
So leading up to the application, right before I submitted it, I made changes up to the last second. Even after the applications went live, I was still like tweaking like a personal statement or moving things around or changing like the name of a particular document. So I would say it was a little bit anticlimactic because I was like, oh, it's submitted. And then I was like, I need to change something somewhere. But I would say it was a big, overwhelming sense of relief because I was like, okay, I'm done with like one big chunk of this whole process. I would say that it was relief and a little bit of, oh my God, okay, now I have to move on to the next step.
And how did you feel when you started getting those first interview invitations?
I would say very surprised. So I got my first couple of invitations in one batch. So you know how they say it comes in waves. So my first couple of interviews came at once the day that the interviews opened for pediatrics. So I got one, and then I was like, oh, and then I got another one, and I was like, oh my God, then I got three, and I was like, this has to be some kind of glitch. What is happening? So it kind of happened like that.
And when you got your first interview, what were you doing to prepare for the interview, and how did it go?
So for my first interview, around 2, 3 weeks before that, I did set up an interview, interview like preparation session with Class Act and that, which is you. And I kind of went over, so in the beginning, I was very clueless. I was like, I don't know what to do. And you had like a whole list of questions that I should have prepared and that I, should talk about. So a couple of days before we had our session, I prepped and I looked up, stuff about the particular college, the surroundings, the college itself, their fellowships, their different rotations, electives, anything particular about the college that I liked. And then I went over why I wanted that college, what I was looking for in pediatrics, and went through a couple of very specific questions and made a template. And then I went over that with you and we practiced, and I felt like that made me very confident. I was able to be confident in the interview because I already had like an idea of what I wanted to say. It's not like I practiced and said the same thing because I wouldn't have remembered, but I had a few checklists and points that I was able to cover in the interview because I already thought about, okay, I want to talk about ABC, and I was able to talk about it during the interview without trying too hard.
And what do you think went best during interviews, and what maybe didn't work so well, or what was an area of difficulty?
So I would say what worked best was the questions that I had already practiced for, which would be simple questions like, tell me about yourself, why us, why this, why peds. So these were questions that I already knew, and I was able to talk about it and talk about my passion and what I liked, and those were very easy. And I would say that some of the questions that there were some questions that caught me off guard. There were some theoretical questions that I was like, oh, it's not like I didn't know the answer, but I feel like I wasn't prepared. But I also think that it's important to be able to take a step back during the interview and say, can I have a couple of seconds? And nobody's going to say no. So I feel like I had a hard time in the first couple of interviews asking for that time. But after a point, I was like, nobody really cares. Like people don't mind if you take that couple of seconds. So when I started asking for those 5 extra seconds and then thinking about it and then telling them an answer, I was fine.
Mm-hmm. And did you communicate with programs after your interviews? Did some programs encourage that or discourage it? What was that like for you?
So I would say 50 to 60% of programs said don't send any thank you letters, don't send any acknowledgement like emails or anything. And the other 50% asked, they said, okay, we would like you to send us thank you emails, or they gave us like feedback forms for surveys and things like that. So I would say I always like kept an ear out in the beginning of the interview where they always tell you if they want you to send them a thank you email or not. And then when I did have to send a thank you email, I kind of knew. And I also noted down points during the interview. I mean, after the interview was over about something that I liked or something we talked about. And I would always like to write a personalized thank you note at the end of it.
So what sorts of information or feedback did you record for yourself after your interviews to help you gauge the program and remember some of the important information?
So that was one thing that I did that I wasn't sure about. And I'm always someone who has like huge Excel sheets for everything. But at this point, I was stumped because I thought, what is the most important part that I want to know? What is the least important part? I don't know what I would want to know 6 months down the line. Maybe my priorities would be different. But then Class Act shared like this Excel form with me, which had, I don't know what to call it, like an algorithm or something that kind of did the math for you. You could put you could basically give numbers and grades to all the programs based on different criteria, and then it kind of did the math for you and gave you kind of an ROL, and also had different tabs. So I made one tab for each college and answered all the set questions that were already there. So that kind of took a bit of the stress off of my mind because I knew that, okay, there's a template and I need to answer these questions. I don't have to put too much thought into it because after the interview, you're so tired, you don't feel like thinking more. So I feel like having that ready and just typing it in made it very easy.
Wonderful. Do you have advice for being able to get through the interview season and just avoiding burnout in case people do get, a higher number of interviews? What are some strategies to be able to perform well for each interview and not feel like you're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again and getting burned out on?
So I would say that that was one big thing for me because I had a couple of interviews scheduled like back to back. And I took them from India, so the time zone was also very different. And I was staying up through midnight and then waking up and trying to do my day-to-day tasks at home. So I would say that if you did get quite a lot of interviews and you're working at the time, it would be nice to take a couple of days off in between so that you don't get too tired. And also, I mean, be mindful when you're scheduling interviews, but I know it can be hard and sometimes you do have to schedule them in one block. But kind of think of each interview as something exciting. Every college is different and every college is exciting. And I always like to look up a little tidbit about the place itself, like the area, find a little fun fact to get like, and I would be excited to read that and find out more and read about it. So I would say finding that one unique thing about each program kind of makes you more excited for that interview. Also, so for me, another fun thing that I used to do was dress up for each interview. So I would wear like different shirts or do my hair in a different way. So I feel like that was fun for me as well.
Nice. I love that. Do you feel like looking up those tidbits about the programs helped you make connections during your interview as well?
100%. So I feel like even for the person who's interviewing you, the process has become monotonous. For you who's giving the interview, it's become monotonous for you as well. So touch wood, if you are in that particular situation where you've burnt out from giving too many interviews, then having that extra piece of information will help set you apart and also kind of have that I would say those particular moments of conversation when you kind of connect with the person you're interviewing, the person who's interviewing you makes that be a little more special.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other advice for how to transition from kind of your practiced answers to really building an authentic, genuine connection with your interviewer? Or is that something that just kind of changes based on who it is that's interviewing you?
So one thing that I would say is important is that you should practice with someone, but don't stick to your answers. Have a checklist in mind, have kind of a format in mind, but don't like vomit up the same answer because the person who's listening to it will know that it's a forced answer and that you've kind of memorized it. So have a checklist in mind, know that, okay, I want to talk about my college, I want to talk about my experience in internship, and I want to talk about this elective. So now I know what I want to talk about. So walking into the interview, I'm not stressed. I know what I want to do. And when I start talking, it kind of starts flowing automatically. So I would say that you will be fine. Just know what you want to talk about. And when the interview starts, in the first couple of seconds, you can gauge the other person's demeanor. You know if they're going to be a little more formal, a little more informal. If it's a resident, they're going to be friendly. So every person is different and you kind of change the tone and the pitch and, you know, whatever words you're saying based on the other person. You can be formal and friendly, they're being formal and friendly. And you can be a little informal if they're being informal. So kind of go by what your interviewer is doing.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. So when you were making your final rank list decisions, what were the factors that weighed in the most for you to help you really gauge, okay, what's going to be in your top 5 and what were the factors that put programs closer to the bottom?
So I would say that one thing that changed from my day one to the ROL deadline day was the interview vibes. That is not something that I thought I would take seriously walking into the match process. I thought, okay, colleges are the good based on its what it is on paper. But when I walked into some interviews, I was like, oh my God, like the people are so nice, the vibes are so nice. Like the program that I matched into, I remember that I just wrote one tiny note at the bottom of my Excel sheet that I made, and I wrote, I would love to go here. I hope they take me is all I wrote. And like one whole column was empty because I was just like 10 out of 10, want to go. And that's all I wrote. And then in like the vibes of the program, I was like, the people are so nice, the residents are so nice. So I feel like that is something that you wouldn't think about too much, but walking into the interview process, that is very important because those are the people you will be with for the next 3 years. So it's important that your vibe matches as well. So I would say that is something that was very important to me. And other than that, also what different rotations the colleges had and fellowship matches as well. And so for pediatrics, some programs are transitioning into X plus Y and some are doing X plus Y plus Z. So if that is something that is important to you, then you should take that into note. But that isn't something that I was too worried about. So I didn't take that into consideration that much.
Perfect. What are you most excited about as you begin residency at Loma Linda?
So I'm most excited about meeting the people. I did get to chat with a few of them during the interview process, and they were so helpful. And even after, a couple of them, like the residents, reached out if I had any questions, and I asked like a big number of questions from stuff like how to get my driver's license, to where do I stay, what do you guys do around Loma Linda and things like that. And everyone was so helpful and so nice. So I'm kind of excited to see all the people that I've been texting and also meet everyone and see the people I'll be working with for the next couple of years. And my parents used to live in California, so they're super excited to go back there again. And they've already started looking for apartments even before I did.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm excited for you and everything that's coming up. Do you have any final pieces of advice for people that are applying this application cycle or in the upcoming cycles, what to be planning for to really help them succeed?
So I would say one advice that I would want to give people is don't be afraid to ask. Something that I realized much later in the process was that people are willing to help. A lot of my seniors from KMC, which is my med school, people I haven't spoken to at all, I reached out to and I asked them a bunch of questions and they were so helpful. They gave me so much advice. And I was very hesitant because in the beginning I thought, I don't know these people. I don't know if they'll respond. I don't know if I should reach out, but it's just a message and just an email. And the least they can do is the worst thing they can do is just ignore you, which is fine. But everyone I've reached out to has always been so helpful and so kind. And another thing is that, so for me, I did my internship. And then I kind of had to schedule step 2 and OET to like really close. I think I wrote the exam on like August 30th, which is the last date you could possibly write it. So I had to do the application really fast and I needed a little bit of outside help, which is totally fine. So I needed someone to like help me proofread everything and help me just kind of like type everything very well and write things down in a nice way. So I feel like if you feel like you need help, totally cool to ask for it. You can get class act to help, or you can ask a senior to help. You can ask one of the residents you worked with during your rotations to help. So whatever works for you, works for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences. And I hope that everyone has found this informative and helpful and inspirational. And we're wishing you all the best for residency coming up.
Thank you.